This is a document which contains essential derivations that we need for transformers, especially voltage transformers. The symbolic diagram for a voltage transformer is shown by putting two coils in coupling with each other. This is how we do it. Primary voltage is Vp, primary current is Ip, secondary voltage is Vs, secondary current is Is. Number of turns in the primary is Np, number of turns in the secondary is Ns. I'm assuming a resistive load, but it does not have to be that way. It can be a complex load also. Okay. Now, once we have reduced the functionality to this circuit, we want to make it more and more realistic so that whatever we calculate is going to be close enough to reality. That is called an equivalent circuit, which we are going to talk about soon. But there's a lot more that we should be talking about first. For instance, how much EMF will be generated in the primary winding and in the secondary winding? It is Faraday's law that dictates the amount of EMF that would be generated in both the windings. The instantaneous value of the primary voltage, let me represent it by a small Vp as a function of time. If phi t is the instantaneous value of the magnetic flux going through the core is the assembly on which primary and secondary windings are wrapped, right? So let's assume that some flux, some time varying flux phi t is going through that core. Then Faraday's law will dictate that Vp should be minus Np d phi by dt. It's a well-known law of physics. Similarly, in the secondary winding, Vs as a function of time will be minus Ns d phi by dt. Fair enough. Now let's say that the magnetic flux is represented by equation 3, where phi m is the peak value, which will be known to us in most cases. Omega is, of course, 2 pi f. You know that quite well. F is the operating frequency. Fine. So if I take this value of phi in equation 3 and substitute it back in equation 1, and later in equation 2 also, I'll get the formulas for instantaneous values of primary and secondary voltages. Primary and secondary EMFs, actually. Voltages are the actual values when losses are included. EMFs are the ideal case when losses are not being included. So using 3 and 4 also, which is omega equal to 2 pi f, in equation 1, I get Vp as a function of time as minus Np d phi by dt. So phi m will come out, and d by dt of sine omega t will become cos omega t. Okay, and minus sign remains as it is. And omega comes out, of course. And similarly, Vst is also written as equation 6. So the peak value of primary EMF, sorry, is, you forget the minus sign. Minus sign can be absorbed by putting 180-degree phase shift. in the cosine function. So the peak value of primary windings EMF will be NP phi m multiplied by omega. And the peak value of the secondary EMF will be NS multiplied by phi m multiplied by omega. RMS value will be obviously peak value divided by square root of 2. So VP RMS will be omega NP phi m divided by square root of 2. And VS RMS will be omega NS phi m divided by square root of 2. Omega is 2 pi f. So if we put that, we get 2 pi divided by square root of 2 f NP phi m. And a similar equation in the secondary also. Only differences in the secondary, we are using NS. In the primary, we are using NP. Generally, it is the magnetic flux density which is given to us in the core. It is generally measured. So if the area of cross section through which the flux is passing is capital A in meter square, and the flux density is Bm, peak value, then phi m will be Bm multiplied by A. Bm is Weber per meter square, which is also known as Tesla, Tesla. Tesla means Weber per meter square. So Weber per meter square value, which is the magnetic flux density multiplied by the area of cross section of the core, will give you the total peak flux, assuming that flux density is the peak value. So if we include that, then equations become even more practical. These are called EMF equations. Although I am using the terms V rather than E, but these are ideal cases. These are the EMFs generated in primary and secondary RMS values. By the way, pi multiplied by square root of 2, I think is around 4.4 something. We'll see that later. Some books give that number rather than square root of 2 multiplied by pi. So it's not a big issue. Either you use this equation or that number 4.43 something. Now, one interesting thing that comes out is that if you divide Vp by Vs, you get Np divided by Ns. This is what I was telling you last time, that the voltage ratio equal to turns ratio. We have proven it now. Okay. A is known as turns ratio. Yes. Scanning is not perfect. Some things have been cut out. It's a lossless transformer. It's an ideal case right now. Now VSIS is the output power, and VPIP is the input power. So they have to be equal because of law of conservation of energy. If you do that, then Vp divided by Vs is Is divided by Ip, which is A. This is the second equation I was telling you last time. That ratio of currents is inverse the ratio of voltages. They both are governed by the turns ratio. Okay. Now, other thing is, how does this load resistance RL look like when seen from the primary input? Obviously, it will not be the same as RL. It will be something different for sure. Let's see what it does as it is seen across the primary input. You see, because of Ohm's law, Vs is RL into Is, right? So that's one equation I'm writing. And input resistance is defined as Vp divided by Ip. Vp is A times Vs. Ip is Is divided by A. We have seen that already, right? So using those two here, what I get is Rn equal to A square multiplied by Vs divided by Is. And Vs divided by Is is the RL value. So input resistance is A square multiplied by the load resistance. Ideal case, of course, lossless situation. This resistance RL connected across the output terminals will be multiplied by the square of the turns ratio when it is measured across the input terminals. This is a very important finding, that transformers actually transform the resistance also, the load resistance also, to a different value when that load is seen across the primary terminals. In fact, more generally, even if there were a complex impedance, this formula would still apply. Only thing is RL would become ZL in that case. Same derivation, but in complex domain. Now let's look at some solved problems, the kind of things you can expect in exam. An ideal voltage transformer has primary voltage of 480 volt RMS by default, okay, and secondary voltage of 120 volt. If the primary winding has 700 turns, how many turns are there in the secondary winding? Such a simple problem. A is simply Vp divided by Vs. 480 divided by 120. And primary winding has 700 turns, so Np is 700. So Ns will be 700 divided by 4, 175. Simple calculation. Okay. Second problem. For the transformer considered in problem 1, if a purely resistive load of 240 ohm is connected across the two terminals of the secondary winding, calculate the resulting currents in primary and secondary windings. The primary input voltage is 480 volts and secondary voltage is 120 volts. Now I'm connecting a 240 ohm resistance across the secondary. So the secondary current will be simply Vs divided by RL, Ohm's law, 0.5 amperes. And IP is Is divided by A. So 0.5 divided by turns ratio, which is 4, 0.125 amperes. If you are not sure about your calculations, always make sure that Vp IP multiplication is almost the same as VSIS. That is the way to check your calculation. Vp is 480 volts, IP is 0.125 ampere. Multiply the two, and Vs is 120 volts multiplied by Is should give you the same answer. Okay. What is the power factor of the load? Third problem. Obviously it is 1 because it's a purely resistive load. What is the input power? What is the output power? What is the efficiency? Input power is simply VPIP. Again, something has been cut. VPIP will be how much? 0.125 multiplied by 480. Whatever it is, you can calculate the number. Okay, input power can be calculated, and output power will also work out to be the same. VSIS will be the same number. So the ratio of the output power and input power will be 100%. I'll double check this page. I'll correct it before I send it to you. I'll put the actual value. Important thing is that input and output power are equal. It's an ideal case, and efficiency is 100%. Simple enough. You can get the number very easily. Okay. Other thing is, you know the currents in primary and secondary. Now that allows you to select the wires. And for that, I was telling you last time, there is a table of standard wire sizes available in the market. This is called AWG, American Wire Gauge System, and equivalently, British system is also there, which is called Standard Wire Gauge System. So look at the primary current that we are dealing with in this particular transformer. Primary current was 0.125 ampere. So what diameter should we choose? Go to this table. This table will be available to you, of course. Go to maximum current and see 0.125 value. Close enough. If you don't get 0.125, you go to the higher value, higher nearest value. So I think the nearest higher value is 0.142 amperes. For that, you need wire size 30. Don't go to the lower side because that will not be safe. You are not getting exactly the current that you want, so go to the next higher possible value, which is 0.142 amperes. Select wire number 30. The diameter is given also. Okay. And for the secondary, the current was 0.5 amperes. So let's go back to the table for the secondary. Close enough to 0.5 ampere. What is the value you've got? I think 0.577 will be fine. For that, you need 24 size wire. So 30 and 24. I hope I'm correct. Let's see. Yeah, 30 and 24. This is how you figure out the AWG required. By the way, SWG values are not very different. Those sizes are very close to AWG. Americans and British, they are very close to each other. You can always work with SWG also. In some other courses in mechanical engineering, I think they will tell you about SWG also. So please learn how to select wire size based on the current values that we have got. Okay, very easy once you have the table. Okay, one more interesting problem. A single phase transformer has NP equal to 1000, NS equal to 200. So turns ratio is 5, obviously. The maximum value of the flux density, okay, in the core is 1.1 Tesla. Tesla means Weber per meter square. When 2200 volt, 50 hertz is applied to the primary winding. Calculate the cross-sectional area of the core. Okay. Remember, we had done this equation. Let's go back to that equation first. This one. Vp equal to square root of 2 multiplied by pi multiplied by f multiplied by np multiplied by bm multiplied by a. You are given everything except capital A in that problem. If you were given secondary voltage, then you will use equation 13, which is similar to equation 12. Only difference is we have got NS in equation 13 and NP in equation 12. So let's go back to the problem. Yeah, simple equation. Yeah, it's given right here. Oh yeah, that factor 2 pi divided by square root of 2 or pi multiplied by square root of 2 is approximately 4.4429. Many books use that number rather than 2 pi divided by square root of 2. Fine, not a big issue. So let's put all the values. F is 50 hertz, NP is 1000, BM is given as 1.1 Weber per meter square, VP is given as 2200 volts. RMS values are given. This formula applies to RMS value. So it is a straightforward calculation after that. You will get the value of A in meter square. To convert it into centimeter square, you would multiply by 10 raised to the power 4. 1 meter has 100 centimeters. So 1 meter square will have 100 multiplied by 100 centimeters square. Okay. Another one. A source which can be represented by a voltage source of 8 volt RMS in series with an internal resistance of 2000 ohm is connected to a, by the way, this problem is essentially going to use this load transformation thing I was telling you about. This one, A square RL type of thing. This is the formula which will be useful in that problem. So it is a 8 volt source. It has internal resistance of 2000 ohms. It is connected to a 50 ohm load. RL is 50 ohm through an ideal transformer. Ideal means lossless. Calculate the value of the turns ratio, small a, for which maximum power is supplied to the load and the corresponding load power. In first year, basic electronics course, you were taught a theorem called maximum power transfer theorem. What it means is the load resistance and source resistance must be equal to each other to get maximum power transferred. Only thing is here we have got a transformer in between. Let me show you the picture. This is how it is. Well, the picture was not given, but I interpreted the problem to come up with this picture. This is what is happening. You have a load, 50 ohm load connected to the secondary, and then the transformer, of course. And at the primary side, you have got 8 volt RMS in series with 2 kilo ohm. So what happens is 50 multiplied by turns ratio square, A square, should be equal to 2 kilo ohm to get maximum power transfer. That is the basic idea here. For maximum power in the load resistance RL as seen between the two input terminals of the primary winding must be equal to the source resistance, which is 2000 ohm. So you equate 2000 with A square RL, and RL is 50 ohm. So you figure out small a turns ratio from there. It turns out to be square root of 40, 6.325 approximately. I'm just checking the calculations. Look okay to me. So this diagram you should be able to draw by yourself based on the statement of the problem given to you. And they also want how much power is being consumed by the load when maximum power transfer is happening. So that is the second part. You need to figure out secondary current. For that, you first figure out primary current, which will be 8 volt divided by 2 kilo ohm, and another 2 kilo ohm will be added because of the effect of 50 ohm at the input. So 8 divided by 4000 amperes, which is 2 milliamperes, is the primary current, RMS value. Secondary current is turns ratio multiplied by primary current. So we use that formula to figure out secondary current, which is around 12.65 milliampere. Now, load power will be IS square RL. You make sure you are careful about units, IS is in milliamperes. So 12.65 milliampere squared. Actually, I have done something else, but if you take this value directly, Yeah, what I have done is I have taken square root of 40 multiplied by 2 and squared it. So 40 into 2 into 2, it's milliamperes. But to get wattage, you need current in amperes. So 10 to the power minus 3 will be squared. It will become 10 to the power minus 6. And load, of course, is in ohms. So you simply put 50. Simplify the calculations to get 8 milliwatt as the answer. Watt always means volt multiplied by ampere. Okay, another one related to resistance transformation. This is a practical problem. A doorbell requires 400 milliampere at 6 volt, AC of course. It is connected to a the bell is going to work at 6 volt input, but the voltage that we get from supply is either 220 volt or, like in this case, it's an American problem, so they have given 110 volt, which is the way US works. So 110 volt and bringing it down to 6 volt will require a transformer, step down transformer. What we are doing is the doorbell is connected to the secondary and actual supply of 110 volt is connected to the primary. The secondary current is the current that the doorbell needs, which is 400 milliamperes. And secondary voltage is also given as 6 volt. Primary voltage is given as 110 volt. And primary contains 2000 turns. So I think it is fairly straightforward to calculate how many turns would be required in the secondary winding. VP is 110 volt, VS is 6 volt, NP is 2000. So small a is VP divided by VS, which is 110 divided by 6, which is 55 divided by 3. And it is NP by NS. So you solve the equation, you get number of turns in the secondary approximately as 109. Important thing is you should read the problem carefully and probably draw a diagram to conceptualize everything. They don't give you diagrams in these problems, unfortunately. And how many watts does the bell require from the transformer? Okay, so that is IS square RS, as simple as. In fact, you can calculate VSIS directly. No need to know the resistance of the bell. You can do this very easily, I'm sure. IP is easy to calculate by using VPIP equal to VSIS. It's an ideal transformer. And once you know IP, you can do VPIP multiplication, which will be the same as VSIS multiplication. You can double check that. So the power requirement is around 2.4 watt. You can check my calculations later. Okay, so for lossless transformers, most of the problems asked are simple enough. It is the lossy transformer which is realistic, which is more of a headache in terms of calculations. I'll be slowly coming to that. Yeah, another thing, important thing to note is that by default, we were assuming that in the primary voltage and secondary voltage have no phase shift between them. And similarly, primary current and secondary current have no phase shift between them, which may be true in a lot of cases. But in some cases, the way the windings are done, there may be 180-degree phase shift also. You will never know what is inside the transformer. So what the manufacturers do, they, on the schematic of the transformer supplied to you, they put a dot, a pair of dots to describe how the windings are done inside. Read this carefully. We generally assume that the primary and secondary voltages and currents are in phase. In reality, this depends on how each winding is wrapped around the core. It can be right-handed for both, it can be right-handed for one and left-handed for the other, etc., etc. You don't have to worry too much about it as long as you understand the dot convention. Manufacturers use dot convention to describe the phase relationships on the symbol of the transformer. There are two possibilities. Both the dots are on the top. On the left side, primary winding is showing a dot on the top. On the secondary side also, there's a dot on the top. What it means is VP and VS are in phase and IP and IS are in phase. This is the condition I will assume by default all the time. And also IP is going in and IS is coming out. That is the way it is supposed to. All the test data given by the manufacturer in the data sheet will be based on these directions, assuming these directions for currents, assuming that VP and VS are in phase with each other, no phase shift between them. If the other kind of convention is given, that means one dot is on top, the other at the bottom. What it means is VP and VS are 180 degree out of phase, and IP and IS are also 180 degree out of phase. And on top of it, both IP and IS are assumed to be going in this case. I would generally avoid case 2 for most of the things I will be asking you. By default, you assume that both the dots are on the top. So VP and VS are in phase, IP and IS are in phase, IP is going in, IS is coming, which is more logical, practically speaking. Dot convention is very important for us to know about. Now losses, they complicate our life. In the PPT also, last time I showed you a lot of things about losses. Here I'm rewriting all that. Losses are primarily, in a transformer at least, they are of two types. One, because of the finite resistance in the windings, in the primary winding as well as in the secondary winding. They are known as copper loss. Other one is the imperfections in the core itself. They are known as iron loss or core loss. On top of it, there may be a little more complication also. Things can happen that you did not anticipate. They are called stray losses, STRAY. We will ignore stray losses in our calculations. Obviously, common sense tells you that input power minus lost power will be output power. That is true for any gadget in the world, right? So lost power in watt, PL, is input power in watt minus output power in watt. Simple equation. Okay. Efficiency is PO divided by PI, output power divided by input power. Percentage efficiency is obviously 100 times that. You can put the value of PO as PI minus PL and come up with another equation, which is equation 24, for defining the power efficiency of the transformer. Nature of losses. Again, something has been cut during the scanning, but it is a statement about stray losses, which we are going to ignore. On the right hand side, probably you will not be able to read everything, but take it from me that it is about stray losses, which we are ignoring. The two main losses are copper loss and iron loss. They are both measured in watts. Iron loss is also known as core loss. And iron loss has two components, eddy current loss and hysteresis loss. Eddy currents are the local currents produced in the core that they take power away from the input power. And hysteresis is the behavior of the material of the core when flux goes from one direction to another and comes back. I'm sure you know the word hysteresis. It was taught to you, I'm sure, in physics courses. We will not go into material science here. We will simply take what we need. Equations have been derived by people, which we can directly use to figure out these losses. Anyway, copper loss is simply Ohm's law. PC is the symbol I'm using for copper loss. In many books, they use WC because W denotes watt. I prefer W symbol for energy. But anyway, not a big issue. So PC, the copper loss in watt will be, oh, by the way, there is no phase relationship involved in writing equation 25. It is the RMS value of primary current, which is IP, squared multiplied by primary resistance, which will be given to you, plus RMS value of the secondary current squared multiplied by secondary resistance, which will also be given to you. Sum of the two is the total copper loss. In a lot of cases, secondary resistance is relatively small because we are talking about stepping down, etc. So for power systems, generally it is the primary winding which contributes a lot more to copper loss than the secondary winding does. But again, you never know. Okay, so simple equation for calculating copper loss is IP square RP plus IS square RS, where IP and IS are pure magnitudes, no phases here. Iron loss, two different components here. Hysteresis loss and eddy current loss. I told you last time that to reduce eddy current loss, we cut the core into thin wafers, stampings, laminations, whatever you want to call them, and usually put bolts through them. That reduces eddy current loss significantly. That concept will be used in generators and motors also after the midterm. Even generators and motors have copper loss and iron loss. But on top of it, they also have rotational losses, friction loss, windage loss, etc. But transformer fortunately has no rotating part, so we are ignoring friction, etc. Right? So hysteresis loss, an approximate equation to calculate this loss is given as equation 26. Material science people have done all this for us. pH in watts is K, which is known as somebody's constant. I can't pronounce this name. It's a German name. This fellow must have come up with this equation. So he put his name on the constant K. This K value will be given to you if necessary at all. Normally in the problems that I ask you, I give you iron loss and hysteresis loss total value rather than asking you to calculate it. So pH anyway, for your reference, you know that there is an equation available. V is not voltage here, keep in mind, it is the volume of the core. Symbols, sometimes can be confusing. You have to look at the context. Here V means volume of the core, total volume of the core in meter cube. F is operating frequency, Bm of course, peak value of the flux density, which is known to us, and K is a known constant for a given material. K ranges from 1.5 joules per meter cube to 2.5 joules per meter cube, depending on the material. I took all this from somewhere, I'm sure you can verify this in several books. There are ways to measure iron loss in practice using experiments. If time permits, I'll come to that later. These equations are approximate guidelines. Practical engineers would rather measure the losses and then move forward. Eddy current loss, for that also there is an equation. First of all, you can read this some part of the flux generated in the core links to other parts of the core, thereby setting local currents called eddy currents. This dissipates some energy in the core itself. This is known as eddy current loss. It is undesirable, but it's there. An approximate formula for that loss is also given. I don't know who derived it. This depends on square of Bm, while the previous one was depending on Bm raised to the power 1.6. A volume is involved here also, volume of the core, I mean. Frequency square matters here, while in the previous formula, it was frequency itself that mattered. So you can see the fact that eddy current losses are higher if frequencies go up. T is the material thickness. That means each of the stampings or laminations, how thick it is, that matters here. So you can imagine if T is small, the loss goes down. That's why we cut the solid core into thin wafers to reduce this loss. Okay, so I think this is almost done. Now, a realistic transformer has a complicated equivalent circuit, and we will be dealing with it in future also. I don't know how to show it to you. Give me 1 minute. Let me show it to you first. One minute. Yeah, here. Hope you can see. If you cannot, I don't know. 1 minute. Let me try to rotate the screen again. This is always difficult to show. But important thing is, I'll explain the physical meaning. Next time I'll draw it in a better way to show it to you more clearly. Give me 1 minute. What happens is, I know this orientation is wrong. What happens is, the basic idea here is that all the losses that I have spoken about, they should be included in the equivalent circuit. If you go back to the very first slide, this is what I have shown you, right? To make it more realistic, what I'll do is I'll put a resistance in series with the primary winding. That will take care of the primary copper loss. Also, if frequencies are high, this winding also produces inductance. So I'll put a series inductance also in the primary to make it a more accurate description. Same thing for the secondary winding. I'll put one RS, one LS. In the primary, one RP and one LP. That is for winding effect. For the core effect, what we do is we put a circuit in parallel with the primary, which approximately describes both eddy current and hysteresis losses. I realize you won't be able to see the diagram the way I want to show it to you. Next time I'll do it on a separate piece of paper. Try to imagine this with 90-degree rotation. Again, it's giving me a pain. Anyway, important thing is I hope you can appreciate what I'm telling you. If you just rotate this diagram mentally by 90 degrees, you will understand. In the primary, I have got a series combination of R and L. In the secondary also, I have got the same thing. And on top of it, I have got a parallel circuit in the primary to capture the losses in the core. That is the whole purpose. After these, I put the ideal transformer to capture the electromagnetic part of it. That's how this equivalent circuit works. Next time I'm going to show it to you in the correct orientation, and then we will move forward for solving other problems.